I'm not sure how old I was, but I was really small, maybe around 6. I was with a bunch of people from my church, having a barbecue at a river. All the kids were swimming in the water. I didn't know how to swim yet, so I was just staying waist deep in the shallow part. At some point, this girl came up to me and was playing with me. We were splashing each other and stuff. The weird thing was that she was probably 13 or so, and I didn't know who she was, even though I knew everyone else there. Apparently, no one was paying attention to us. She started pushing me out deeper and deeper to where I couldn't touch. She just kept laughing the whole time. My head kept going underwater, and I tried grabbing onto her arms when she would push me, but she easily knocked my grip loose. The slight current slowly pulled me away from my friends and family while I struggled to tread water. I was panicking, but she wouldn't stop pushing me and laughing. I could not possibly have looked like I was having fun. I would try to yell, but was only ever above water long enough to take a breath. Every time my feet touched the mud for a split second, she would just push me again. I couldn't believe she was laughing. I was sure I was going to drown, but no one seemed to notice. Of all people to intervene, it would happen to be my childhood bully, Zachary. He had always been a jerk to me, mentally and physically abusive, but I still feel like that day he might have saved my life. He came up and told her to get away from me. He grabbed me by the arm, pulled him up to where I could stand again. Then he ran off and continued to play with the other kids his age, as if nothing happened. The girl was already a ways away too. I went on playing, as with so many other things. I don't think I told anyone until I was much older. Pretty sure I never saw that girl again. I'd like to share with you a series of horrific events from my childhood that we never had a real resolution to. There were some suspects, but no one was ever brought to justice. Also, there have been a lot of terrible things happen on my mom's property, and that's another story. But here's part of the beginning. This part of the story happened roughly around 1990 during my summer break from school, but continued on for quite some time. I must have been in about 2nd or 3rd grade. I grew up with just my mom. My dad was never in the picture, so we lived alone until I was about 12 when she remarried. Our secluded country neighborhood was safe for the most part, and all of our immediate neighbors were elderly. Except for one couple who had a few young adult sons around my brother's age, but for the most part though, didn't have much riffraff in the area. At first, there were only minor clues to indicate something was going on, such as things being moved in the backyard, and I guess because my mother has always been a paranoid conspiracy theorist, she had an idea that something was happening. I didn't really know this until I heard her talking about it much later after the events. She tried to hide things so they wouldn't scare me. She even started sleeping in my room with me at night, probably because she was paranoid, but I assumed it was because we could stay up late and watch movies together and eat snacks. One morning after I got up, I noticed that our old wooden back door had huge chunks missing out of it, around the part where the lock goes into the door frame. It was as if someone was trying to chip away at the locked part. I showed Mom what I had discovered, not realizing why the door was damaged, and she went completely silent, pale-faced and panicked. I could tell something was wrong, but I was just too young to understand that someone had tried to break in, either in the middle of the night or when we were out. That day, she mended the door to the best of her ability, and if I remember correctly, she even put a new lock on it from the hardware store. She also filed a police report, but there was nothing they could do. I had a German Shepherd named Munchie. He was a big spoiled baby who loved raiding the fridge with me, but to a stranger, he was probably very intimidating. He was my best friend and very watchful over me, and I still miss him to this day. For a week or two, after Mom and I would go to bed, Munchie would start pacing and whining and acting very anxious. Since we lived in such a rural place with no imminent danger, we thought, Mom would frequently let him outside by himself. So one night, when he was acting exceptionally strange, she let him outside alone. We didn't have central air because our house was old, built in the 50s, and we were poor, and Kentucky summers weren't really too hot anyway. At night, Mom would open up all the windows in the house, with a halfway burglar latch, of course. Since she was in the room with me, watching a movie, we had both my bedroom windows all the way open. My back window overlooked a bit of a hill, which gradually slopes into a low, wide bottom. The bottom was full of tall weeds and bushes. Suddenly, we heard movement in the brush. Munchie. Then we heard him snarling like a werewolf. My mom got up and ran to the window, but couldn't see anything. What we heard next was horrifying. It sounded as if Munchie was attacking someone. He was making those awful noises as if he was eating someone alive. I began to cry, terrified that something would happen to my best friend, and my mom started screaming in horror for Munchie to come home. We heard what sounded like someone escaping my dog's wrath and taking off through the brush. My mom ran to the back door with me right behind her and called out for Munchie at the top of her lungs, until he came running back into the house. He was panting and grunting and bristled up. I hugged him so tight, I probably nearly squeezed the life out of him. As time progressed, things got worse. Being so young, I didn't know for a long time, but my mom was safeguarding the house. She even moved a tall dresser in front of my window that overlooked the hill and bottom. She tried her best, but whoever was harassing us was finding new ways to make our life hell, or maybe try to kill us. One night, she said she heard peculiar noises coming from the backyard. I don't necessarily remember this, so I called her for details before writing this. The sounds were coming from under the dining room windows, which overlooked the backyard. She turned on the security light on the back of the house and saw a ladder propped up. This incident seemed more like an empty threat than a real attempt, especially considering the back door was probably easier access. We don't know if the person thought the windows would be unlocked or what, but for whatever reason, they gave it a try. Again, she called our local police and they did nothing. I should probably note that we didn't really have much law enforcement there. You probably wouldn't believe me if I tried to tell you how worthless law enforcement was, and still is in that area. On another occasion, and this memory is burned into my brain because it scared me so bad, someone snuck up to my bedroom window one night. I hate to even think what their intentions might have been. Mom had drifted off to sleep, but I was quietly watching the rest of Willy Wonka. I was looking in the direction of my ominous window, the one overlooking the bottom, so I ended up getting a good look at this big hand, which reached up and slapped my window screen multiple times, in rapid succession. I screamed, and my mom woke up, and the tormentor took off. My mom is a dog person. She adores dogs and always had lots of dogs and puppies around. We had 7 little black pups, and the mother dog around this time, and they lived outside of our huge property, had plenty of space to play, and a nice big doghouse. At some point, around the same time this stuff was happening, we had to be out of town for a few days. Mom had some people watching the house, and I guess she really didn't think anything horrendous would happen. Then again, she wasn't aware of how far this thing would go. When we came home, Mom's puppies had been killed and lined up in a row in the side yard, close to my window that overlooked the bottom. This was devastating. The police did little to help, which included telling her how to use her sawed-off shotgun. I forgot to ask, but I'm nearly positive my mom ended up sending the mommy dog away to my sister's house on the other side of town. Months later, incidents were increasing in occurrence, and then someone decided to take it way too far. Something hit the back of the house in the wee hours of the morning. My mom looked out the windows and saw nothing, at least not until the next morning. She found a stick with a charred pine knot on it. Someone had apparently lit it on fire and threw it at our house. I assume they were hoping our house would burn. Don't even ask about the cost because they did nothing yet again. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew who the culprit was and didn't care. Then one day, Munchie went missing. He had gone to the bathroom in the evening before bed, but he didn't come back immediately like always. He vanished. I don't even want to go into detail about this because it breaks my heart all over again, but we found him days later. He had been poisoned. To be completely honest, I could keep going with this story, although it takes a lot of unbelievable turns. Not all of them are horrifying, some are just ridiculous. Then, around 2009, a multiple year-long court case began, where my mom had to fight a group of her neighbors in court to keep them from stealing her property. Those events led us to believe the people involved with that case may have had something to do with the torment we experienced all those years ago. But honestly, all we can do is assume. So tormentor, I kind of wish we could meet, but you're a coward who harasses women and children and hurts animals. I'm 22 years old. We used to have a neighbor who was around 60 or 70 years old, and he died a few years ago. When he was still alive, he would cause us so much trouble. He scratched our car, poisoned our apple trees and grass, and blew up a firework near me to temporarily cause me to go deaf in 1 year when I was 4. All kinds of things. His son was a judge in our city, so pretty much everything we took to court was against us. I remember Dad often called us from work to tell us not to be alone at home, and we would have to stay at Grandma's. When I was little, I think around 6 or 7, I would frequently have nightmares about seeing a face outside of our bathroom window. The window was above our bathtub. It's high enough that no one can actually see in unless they climb the roof of our shed, which is underneath the bathroom window in our garden. Coincidentally, the shed is directly next to a fence that separates our garden from the neighbor's one. I still remember the dreams. I remember having them pretty much every other night. I never told my parents when I was little because we never really talked about anything like that, so I didn't really share anything that was happening to me. Well, I grew up thinking that they were just dreams and that was it. I did mention them to my therapist last year because we were discussing some personal problems, and I felt like this was kind of connected. After coming home, my mom asked me what I talked about with my therapist, so I finally shared I used to have such dreams. I never really thought about them being real, but she told me I actually did tell her I saw our neighbor on our shed's roof. I don't remember telling her that, but she said I did mention it several times, and even my friends told her they saw him there, and they came over to our house and it creeped them out. Apparently, I never mentioned him watching me shower, but after she told me that, it really clicked for me, and it was as if I suddenly remembered that. Yeah, I do think it was him. It would make no sense, and the fact that it happened still creeps me out. There was another incident that creeped me out. It happened when I was 9 or 10. I went to the balcony in the evening. The balcony door was in my room, and I often went there to call my cat home in the evening. But this time, I saw a person standing in the middle of our garden. It was already dark out, and I couldn't really tell who it was. I waited for a little bit to see what the person did, but I didn't really see him move. It was as if he was just standing and staring in front of him. I called out, "Dad," because obviously I expected it to be him, even though I found it odd. But the person looked up at me, and though it was dark, I could tell it was someone else. I think it was partly because my eyes just adjusted to the dark, and I could make out the silhouette of the person better. I went to tell my dad, who was downstairs, but when he looked, there was no one there. I went back upstairs to my room and went to the balcony again. I noticed my neighbor's back door closing just when I looked there. I don't remember if directly the next day or a few days later, but our grass turned brown, and we found out it was poisoned.